Welcome to VatCan's CanScope introduction video. This is the first video in a series of training videos being produced to aid training of controllers in VatCan. This video is intended to introduce you to the basic layout and function of Euroscope by exploring the menus with you and helping you to connect with Euroscope for the first time. Users who are familiar with Euroscope will not need to watch this video. This video replaces much of the original first lesson your instructor would have taught. Since the lesson was basically a follow-along demonstration, we've converted it to a video in the interest of accelerating training. This video assumes you successfully installed Euroscope and the CanScope extension for Euroscope. If not, please stop now and install them. This video was produced using version 3.1D of Euroscope, as the current CanScope installer doesn't support version 3.2. However, an updated installer is in development. If you've had any issues during the installation or you have any questions, please contact your instructor. They'll be happy to help answer your questions. But since most people get set up with very few issues, this video will help move the process along and help you get to actually controlling aircraft on your first training session. So to begin, we'll fire up Euroscope. The easiest way to do this is using one of the PRF files that has been located in the newly installed CanScope directory on your computer. The PRF files are profiles for Euroscope. Each one contains information about data files, views, etc. for various FIRs within Canada, or you can set them up for different places around the world so that you can keep your settings and your data files for different areas separate and easily loaded without having to load individual files. When you installed Euroscope, it should have automatically associated PRF files with Euroscope. As you can see, I've got the PRF file for Toronto here highlighted, and you'll see I have the option to open it with Euroscope even though the icon has not been changed. In Windows 10, the file associations are sometimes unreliable, so you may have to go and manually update the file association. But assuming that you've done that, the easiest way then is to just simply click on the PRF file for the FIR that you're interested in, and Euroscope will launch. So welcome to CanScope. CanScope is a plugin for Euroscope that creates a realistic simulation of Canadian ATC systems. Euroscope itself is a controller client that connects to the VatSim network and allows you to see aircraft and talk to aircraft. Euroscope is a very well-written client with lots of very advanced configuration options available. What the CanScope installation does is set up most of the advanced configurations to simulate Canadian ATC, so you don't have to worry about these advanced options and you can basically jump right into controlling in a very true-to-life environment. So I'm going to begin with an overview of the screen before I lead you through an in-depth walkthrough of the menus and other areas of Euroscope that you'll use on a daily basis. So across the top of the screen here, you can see we have a menu bar. This menu bar here is how you access pretty much all of the menus and functionality of Euroscope for configuration and logging in, etc. Below that is, of course, the radar screen itself. Depending on what FIR you've logged in as, you'll see some sort of a airspace diagram, possibly with airways, airspace, nav aids, airports. Depends on exactly what you've loaded. And then around the outside of the radar screen, what you'll see are some various lists. These lists act kind of like windows. You can move them around the screen as you see fit. You can close them individually. You can window shade them, so if we had information on them right now they're blank because we're not connected. You could click on the little arrows here to close to remove all the information except for the menu bar, or click on them again to reveal all the information. Down at the bottom of the screen is a message area. This message area is where you'll find all sorts of messages from other pilots as well as from the software, the VatSim servers, etc. It acts sort of like a tabbed system, so you'll always see 4 lines of messages, and then above that on the left you'll see a list of all the open message windows that you have. Right now we've only got the basic software message open because all we've done is launch Euroscope. If you want to go back further than the 4 lines in the history, you can use page up and page down to see further back to see what's been listed there, and everything is conveniently timestamped for you as well. Below that is the input box. The input box allows you to type messages to other pilots on the network, or transmit messages via text, transmit on your frequency via text, or you can also enter in commands either for the Euroscope or for the VatSim servers. To the right of the input box there is a status area. Right now it's blank. This will provide extra info about various items as we go through this walkthrough. You'll see some of the extra info that gets provided there. So to begin, we'll start talking right away about the menu bar and we'll get you connected to Euroscope. First thing over here is a very simple little menu in the very top left corner. The title menu basically lets you turn things on and off within the title bar so you can decide what you need to show. Right now I'm working on a slightly lower resolution, so this video is not too big, but for most people with modern monitors, you probably could have everything on here and it wouldn't make too much of a difference. You'd be able to see it all on your menu bar without too much hassle. But if you find there's anything that you don't feel that you need, you can always turn it off there. The first menu that you're actually going to use is, of course, the Magical Connect menu. That is pretty much one of the most important ones that we're going to look at today, because we're going to use it to try and get you connected to VatSim for the first time. So when you click the Connect button, you get the Connect dialog. The Connect dialog basically has all the information you'll need to start Euroscope running and connecting to the VatSim network. So first, a little bit about the connection mode. Normally, you'll always be using direct to VatSim. I will talk about proxies shortly, so if you need to manually connect to a proxy, you can do it here. At the bottom, you can opt to play back a log file that you created with previously in Euroscope, which is handled down here, or these three in the middle are used basically to set up simulator sessions, so your instructor can provide extra aircraft on the Sweatbox server, which is our training server, to help train you. For the most part, you're always going to need to be connected direct to VatSim as a controller. Below that, you're going to have your VatSim your VatSim call sign. Today, we're going to use a observer call sign. So I'm going to type in ZYZ_XX_OBS. So you've got a list of preset call signs here, or you can type in your own call sign and save the profile at some point. For observers, this is an observer call sign. For observers, we always use the same format. We use the airport we're interested in, or the region we're interested in, underscore your initials, underscore OBS. Always use your initials for an observer call sign in case there's multiple people trying to observe the same station. VatSim doesn't allow duplicate call signs when you log in, so having your initials in there helps make it somewhat random, and that's very unlikely that anyone's going to have the same call sign as you. Obviously, fill in your real name and your real VatSim certificate number or your VatSim ID, along with your VatSim password. Over here on the right, the facility should normally be automatically set based on what you put in here, because we're doing something a little, not in a normal controlling position, but an observer position. We need to specify manually that it is an observer position. Make sure you put your current VatSim rating. On the Sweatbox training server, doesn't really matter too much, but on the real VatSim network, if you don't set your rating correctly, or you don't set the correct facility based on your call sign, you'll be disconnected immediately from the network. Most likely, at this point, you're either an observer or a Student 1 S1 rating. For servers, today we're going to use the Sweatbox server. There are a number of servers. These are always changing. They're provided free of charge to the VatSim network by various entities and individuals, and they're named based on their location. So you can usually pick one that's going to be closest to you. They're all linked together via high-speed network, so the key is for you to connect to the one that's closest to you, and that'll get you connected to the VatSim network quickly and easily. There's a great tool to help determine which is the best which is the best server for you, and that is a tool called VatSpy. So this is VatSpy. VatSpy is a utility that lets you peer into the VatSim network, so you can see what's happening without necessarily being logged in as a controller. It just downloads information from the network every couple of minutes. It's not as often as a controller client, but more than often enough for you to see what's happening on the network. You can see aircraft that are flying around the world. You can move in and around different parts of the world, zoom in and out, and see also other controllers that are online. Blue would be centers in this case, towers and ADISs that are online elsewhere, as well as where aircraft are inbound or outbound from certain airports. You can search for controllers, search by flight numbers, airport details, etc. And one of the most useful tabs, especially when you're first getting used to the network, is the Network Servers tab, which shows you a complete list of all the servers that are available on the network right now. Their geographic name and their location as reported by the server owners. And best of all, you can click the button here to ping each and every server. So I usually use the USA East server. There's now 2 East servers, so I can compare them and see how they perform. The lower the number, the better the performance. Basically, the less time it takes for a message to travel to that server. Anything usually under 100 milliseconds, which shows up as green, is fine. In case of Europe, I do that. I get a little bit of yellow. It's not slow, but it's not exactly fast either. And then if I go somewhere like the UAE and ping that, I get all red. It's way too long of a lag time. All the servers are linked with very high-speed backbones, so the key is just to find the server that is closest to you, and then all these servers are linked together, and you'll connect to the VatSim network that way. So once you determine what server is best for you, then you can go ahead and use that in the Euroscope. So anyways, back to Euroscope here. And so you can see we've got the Sweatbox server selected for today. Below this, we've got the ability to save a profile that we've created with our call sign if we like the profile and we want to keep it set up and put it in our list of preset call signs. And then we've got a few information lines we put here. Right here we've got the log off time, and the log off time in Zulu is the time that you're planning to leave so that aircraft can plan to arrive before then or depart before then. If you leave it blank, it's fine. It'll ask you every time you log on if you want to leave it blank, and you can just say yes. And then we've got a couple of ATIS lines here. These ATIS lines are not really ATIS lines in the actual ATIS sense, but they're just information lines for a controller. They're not. They are visible to pilots, but they're not automatically visible. The pilot has to request it. So don't put anything too important here. Usually we like to put just information about our website so pilots know where to go to get more information. Below this is one of the more important things for the connection itself is our range slider. So this range slider here allows us to select how far away from the center of our screen or the center of our radar positions we would like to be able to see aircraft. And it's in miles. So depending on your position, you'll want to see aircraft maybe a long way away or only very close by aircraft. So if you're in a ground or a tower ground position, you may only want 5 or 10 miles. A tower position maybe 10 to 20 miles. A terminal position might want 50 to 75 miles, something like that, and a center will want a lot of visibility, 300 to 600 miles. The reason we can set this range is that it saves bandwidth for the VatSim servers if they don't have to send us information about airplanes that are a long way away. If I'm working ground in Toronto, I don't need to know about airplanes that are 300 miles away. I just need to know about the airplanes that are within 5 miles of me. So VatSim will only send you information about airplanes and controllers that are within your range. Now, below this is an area where we deal with setting up and running our proxy server. So what is a proxy server? Well, I'll let this diagram show you. So when you start Euroscope on your computer and connect to the VatSim network, Euroscope will automatically start a proxy server within Euroscope. This server listens for other connections from your computer. And information, of course, is passed from VatSim to your Euroscope screen. When you start up a second Euroscope program on your computer, it automatically will connect to the proxy server on the first Euroscope, and information from the VatSim network will then be transferred to the second copy of Euroscope through the proxy server on the first copy. And this allows you to have multiple copies of Euroscope running on multiple screens. You can even have 3 copies of Euroscope running if you have 3 screens. And then the information is distributed from one Euroscope from this first Euroscope copy to all the rest. And this allows you to have multiple screens with different views open. So this proxy server box down here just simply controls whether or not that proxy server in the first instance of Euroscope is active and running. When you do run a second copy of Euroscope, as I've done over here, you'll see that the connect dialog changes to a slightly different icon to indicate that it's connected through a proxy server and is no longer able to connect direct to the VatSim network. You'll also notice that the voice controls icon here has been disabled, which we're going to talk about in a little bit because only one copy of Euroscope can have the voice controls. That'll usually be the first instance that's running. So we go back to that first instance, and so that's what we dealt with the proxy server there. Below that we have a little area where we can access scenarios to load into the Sweatbox server. Usually only instructors will ever need to use that. And below that is an area to control, to start logging and to control playback of logging should you decide to play back a previously recorded log file. So once everything is set up correctly, we hit the connect button. And here we get a voice communication setup screen. I'm going to close that momentarily. So what happened when you connected? Hopefully you heard a sound, and hopefully you saw the icon for the connect screen quickly change from connect to Sweatbox, indicating that you are successfully connected to the Sweatbox server. If you didn't connect successfully and the connect dialog and the connect button popped back to connect here, there usually is a way to troubleshoot it if you go into the new server message window that we loaded here, and it will usually give you a reasonably worded error code that you can figure out, whether it's incorrect password, inactive account, perhaps a duplicate call sign, somebody's already got your call sign that's logged on. Whatever reason, you can try and figure that out there, so you're never quite completely alone when trying to figure it out. There's usually some hint as to what went wrong. But if you did get successfully connected, then congratulations, you're now on board the Sweatbox server. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the rest of the items in the menu bar here to get you on your way to controlling. Once you've logged in as logged into a server, the next button here is not really a button, but just simply a status window that shows you the call sign you're currently logged on as. So here's my observer call sign, as well as the rating you're currently logged in with. So INS Plus for an I3, you'll see OBS for observer, or STU1 for student 1. And the next menu that we'll be really interested in is right here is the voice communication setup menu. Clicking that button brings up the voice communication setup menu, and this allows us to select voice channels that we're going to listen to. I'm going to quickly switch my logged in call sign to a ground call sign just to show you what it will look like when you log in with an actual call sign. Because we didn't actually log in with a call sign, a proper ATC call sign before, you'll see it popped up the voice communication dialog because it didn't know what channels we wanted to listen to. So now I'm logged into the Sweatbox as CYYZ ground. So what happens when I now click the voice communication setup dialog is that Euroscope has searched for and found a preset channel that matches my call sign, CYYZ ground here, and it's automatically connected me to it. If that doesn't work successfully, or if you're observing, then you may need to come in here and manually configure some things. So the top half of the voice communication setup does contain all of our preset channels that we've already configured for various positions we may have worked in the past or may expect to work in the future. For each one we have a name which usually corresponds to the login ID we're going to use, a frequency that the pilots will tune in, a word about frequencies here, the way they're programmed into the VatSim system. They have to have 6 digits plus a decimal sign in the middle, so 121.650, even though the last digit is always 0 regardless. There are certain frequencies where it's supposed to be a 5 according to the way it happens in real life, such as 124.47 should be .475, but the way VatSim's been programmed, we actually just set them all to the last digit to 0. Next we have the voice server and the channel. So the way the voice servers work is they're actually completely independent from the VatSim servers, other than information is passed through the VatSim server telling us where to log on. So to use another quick diagram for an example here. So when a controller connects to the VatSim network, they also select a voice server and a channel on that server to connect to. If the server channel doesn't exist, it's created. When a pilot connects to the network and tunes in the controller's frequency, the controller sends information about what server and channel they're connected to, and the pilot's client seamlessly connects to that server and channel. Then whenever one person transmits, everybody else on that channel hears everything that's said. This becomes a problem, however, when you start to have students in the Sweatbox using the same call signs and the same channels as the people on the real VatSim network, because they still connect to the same server and the same channel, and the voice server doesn't know what network they're actually connected to. So now the student communicates with everybody on the VatSim network and the Sweatbox server at the same time, and you end up with these weird ghosts that nobody knows where they actually are. The solution then is simply to just select a slightly different channel on the same voice server, and then this separates the communication again between the students and the instructors. So you can see here the server that we've listed for our voice server is rw.liveatc.net, which is one of the more common ones that's used nowadays, and the channel usually matches the call sign, so we've used CYYZ_ground. Then we've got a series of checkboxes. The first one, the primary checkbox, indicates this is our primary ATC frequency. So this is the one that we have control of what channel is being used for this frequency. And it's the one that we transmit on primarily as opposed to our secondary frequencies, which I'll explain in just a minute. We also have a checkbox for ATISes. So if this is actually our ATIS, then this checkbox should appear checked here. And then we have a couple of checkboxes to receive and transmit text. So again, this basically controls whether or not we hear or are able to transmit text on this frequency to other pilots. And likewise, we can control whether or not we can transmit and receive voice on this frequency to and from other pilots. We can choose to just listen or just transmit, but usually for our primary channel especially, we'll want both. You'll notice that the headset icons are green, and they actually indicate that we're successfully connected to the server. If I click on this line here, you'll see down here below to the right, there's a list of connected users. Right now, the only one is myself still. CYYZ_ground. The little star next to it indicates this is me. Anybody else that's connected to your voice channel would be listed underneath you here as well. If I take myself off of these voice channels, you'll see I disappear as a connected user. For a moment after I try to reconnect, I get a red light just to indicate that it's connecting until it successfully connects when the lights turn green again. And when I transmit, you'll notice when I transmit, part of my microphone transmit here turns red. And likewise, when I receive communication from somebody else, my green receive my receive icon will turn red as well. We can change our presets. We can create new ones using the 4 fields down here and the buttons here. If I need to change a preset, I need to first of all uncheck everything on that line before the modify button becomes available to me. Once I check anything, then that modify button is no longer available. So to use an example here, Toronto North Departure has selected still one of our old servers, czwg.ca, that does not exist. It's not online anymore. So if I want to change that, make sure I have nothing checked on that line, come down here and change the voice server to a new voice server, rw.liveatc.net. Hit modify, and you'll notice that it has now been changed here on this line. That's all there is to it. So as you go through right now, CanScope hopefully has an update in progress. As you go through and start to connect to various channels, you'll probably need to start updating them to be up to rw.liveatc.net. If you try to connect to a server that does not exist, you'll notice that the red icon just simply stays red forever. It's unable to ever make a successful connection. So next we will quickly go into hardware setup here, which is critical the first time we connect to Euroscope. So we have 2 sets of audio devices. We have a primary and a secondary, and we can use input and output on both. The primary is connected to our primary frequency as checkmarked here, and can be used separately or use the same device as is used for our secondary channel. Secondary channel is basically any other channel that you might be listening to, whether it be other channels you're listening to learn and to train perhaps, or just if you're a little bit bored and want to hear what other people are doing around the network, you can listen to their channels while you're also tuned into a primary channel and controlling yourself. The nice thing about being able to do this is that you can connect your primary perhaps to your headset and your secondary to your speakers, so it's very easy for you to tune out the secondary when transmissions start coming in on your primary frequency. You'll also notice that for everything, there's pretty much a wave and a direct sound version listed. No one has ever been able to make much of a discernible difference between the two. They're just different input methods for Windows, but they both work equally well. If you find one that works better for you, then by all means keep that one. Down here are a couple of tests we do to help diagnose our voice hardware. The squelch test basically detects the amount of background noise on your primary and secondary devices. The mic test, so you need to be quiet for the squelch test, whereas the mic test actually tests how well the mic works when you're talking, as I never seem to stop doing. If there's something wrong with the mic, it'll give you a diagnosis if it's too quiet, if it's too loud, etc. At the very bottom of the screen are 2 very important buttons we're going to need to configure, especially the primary push-to-talk key, as well as potentially the secondary. Generally, unless you're instructing, you probably don't need a push-to-talk on a secondary frequency, but the primary push-to-talk you will definitely need. I generally set it to my left control key. You can click set and hit whatever button. Generally, you don't want letters or things you might type with. Normally, you want something that you are not going to necessarily want to hit on a regular basis, or in casual texting might hit. So usually Control, Shift, Alt, something of that nature that you're not going to be pressing otherwise on a very regular basis when you're logged into the network. Once all that is set up, and you only need to usually do that the first time you log into Euroscope, as long as you save your settings and as long as you don't change where your devices are. Sometimes even just changing what USB port something's plugged into may change your hardware setup. But once you've done that, and the first time you always log on to Euroscope each day, you should generally do a quick mic test. So what you do is you simply connect your mic to a playback device, click this box, and then when you hold down your push-to-talk key as well as transmitting on your primary frequency, it will also be played back in your headset so that you can check your headset volume and also your microphone volume to make sure that you are able to transmit and receive a message at a reasonable volume. Once you've done that at the beginning, then you can usually uncheck it because there's usually about a 2-second lag in VatSim, and you'll drive yourself nuts trying to listen to your 2-second lag. Once you've completed your voice check, and transmit it on that frequency as a quick voice check, so feel free to do that. Connect to the playback device to hear yourself. Simply hold down your push to talk and just simply say test 1 2 3 3 2 1 test out. And if you can hear yourself through your speakers, then you're most of the way there to getting on the network and controlling. Just be careful if anyone else is listed as connected on your channel. You don't want to interfere with actual communications on the VatSim network. So as I pointed out before, switch to a different channel that's not occupied. And that's basically it for the voice communication setup screen. You'll notice after we've successfully logged in that our frequency, our primary frequency, if we have one, is now listed to the right of our headset icon there. And you'll also notice a neat thing that the headset icon does when you're transmitting or receiving. Parts of the headset will turn orange momentarily to indicate that you're transmitting or receiving. One more interesting thing to note, if your primary frequency is not set correctly, sometimes when you get disconnected forcefully from the network, this might happen. You'll notice that when you exit the voice communication setup screen, the frequency indicated here becomes 199.998. That's basically the error frequency, the error code. If you see that, then probably your primary frequency box became unchecked, and you just have to check it again to fix the situation, and we're back to the correct frequency again. All right, one more menu we're going to introduce here quickly, and we'll take a break, actually two more. The first one we'll take a very quick tour of, so we're going to go a little bit out of order, go way down past the clock to this button that looks like a runway icon. We click that one, and it brings up our active airport runway selector dialog. So what this shows is a list of all the airports and runways that are listed in our sector file, and we're allowed to pick active airports and active runways for ourselves. Euroscope should automatically pick active airports for you based on your position, but sometimes you may need to change them. So I'll just click Show Active Airports Only, and because I'm Toronto ground, the only thing I'm interested in is Toronto itself. So you can see here we've got the airport listed, we've got the departure and arrival columns listed here, and if I click anywhere in either departure or arrival for the first set here, it turns it off for the entire airport. So this is indicating that I am controlling departures and arrivals, and I want to know information about departures and arrivals in Toronto. Following that, we have a list of all the runways in Toronto, and again a departure and arrival column. In this case, we're specifying what runways we are actively using for each configuration. So in this case, I specified to use 33 right for departures and 33 left for arrivals. This does a couple of important things for us. First of all, when information is being populated in Euroscope, such as runway assignments and whatnot, it automatically assigns whatever runway we've indicated for departures or arrivals. We can change it, but at least most of the airplanes will automatically be assigned the correct runway without you having to change anything. The other place where this becomes really useful, as I'm going to talk about momentarily, is in the voice ATIS. So now that we've set this one up correctly, just make sure you've got some departure and arrival runway set there for Toronto Pearson. It doesn't even matter which one today, so you could do the same as I have, 33 right, 33 left. Hit OK, and we go back along the menu bar to the letter that's immediately after the frequency that you listed as a primary frequency. So chances are, if this is your first time running Euroscope, it's probably an A for alpha. I just happened to use uniform last time. Whatever the letter is, you click on it, and it brings up the voice ATIS setup dialog. This is a very, very useful, helpful tool that saves you a lot of work in Euroscope by automating the automatic terminal information service. So the way it works here is that basically the top half of the screen is a bunch of pre-recorded WAV files that have been carefully recorded in a proper sound editing piece of sound editing software to minimize the gaps between them, so when they are all stitched together, it sounds like a pretty smooth voice recording. You can actually use these controls down here to actually add your own additional files. If there's a file, a phrase, or something that you want to use that isn't here, you can actually add your own. It's not the best system in the world. The start and stop recording is not particularly accurate, so you often end up with too big a gap before or after, or maybe cut off a little bit at the beginning and the end. But in a pinch, it can help you record new little sound clips for your ATIS. What you'll be usually dealing with is the second half of the screen, the bottom half here. So we go first of all to our ATIS airport field here. Make sure we filled it out correctly, so CYYZ for Toronto Pearson. And what you do is you hit Get METAR, and it automatically, as soon as you hit that button, it will retrieve the latest METAR or hourly weather report from Toronto Pearson. And it just shows it to you as it's coded there's plenty of websites out there on the internet to tell you how to translate metars. So don't, if you're not sure how to do that, I suggest you learn, as it's very useful for a controller. I'm not going to go into that here. I could spend an entire video dedicated to that for sure. So we get the current information in Toronto. We can set the current ATIS info. So generally at the beginning of the day they start at alpha and they just can cycle through all the way to Zulu and then back to alpha again. You can manually change it here. And what we have down here then is our ATIS maker URL. And what this will do is this will simply send out a request to a website based on the information we've requested here, and it will send us back a formatted ATIS. So this ATIS maker URL is sort of a template. We hit test URL and it extracts that URL, fills in some of the information about the weather we've just gotten, about our active runways that we've chosen, and then it sends it out over the web, and it comes back with this block revised up here. And this block now has information uniform in Toronto, and basically it starts to spell out exactly what's going to be said from the records here. So the Euroscope will simply read through this and play the text files that relate to all of these particular phrases, words, numbers, etc. Once you've done that, you've set it all up correctly. First of all, before I do that, there's usually a mistake in everybody's new setup in Euroscope. If you look at the ATIS maker URL line here, scroll most of the way across till you get to this and app type equals, and by default, for whatever reason, it's always been set to NDB by default with every installation. So the approach type that's being advertised was always by default an NDB approach. In Toronto, we're pretty much always doing ILS approaches, so you can delete the word NDB there and replace it with ILS. Hit test URL, and what you'll see, I'll change it here to something else, just as by way of an example. I'll change it to, let's say, RNAV, and I hit test URL, and you'll notice that now where it used to say approach was ILS runway 33 left, I've now changed it to say approach RNAV runway 33 left. Once you've got this entire area set up the way you like it with the runways, approaches, weather, etc., then all you need to do to get it on the network is to hit connect ATIS, and this connects your ATIS channel to the network itself, and then we start what's called a multiple record playback, which is just this, playing back the multiple text records or voice records that go with this whole text phrase, this whole paragraph of text here. And as long as everything grayed out properly, you're now connected with an ATIS. You can also click the listen playback button here to listen to exactly what is being repeated on your frequency, just to check and make sure that it's working and that everything sounds correct. Usually you'll want to turn that off as well, because that will drive you nuts quickly. What makes this system so beautiful, though, is at the very bottom of the screen here is this little checkbox here, automatically generate new ATIS using the URL. When you check this box, anytime a new METAR is received by Euroscope through the VatSim network, it will automatically increment the ATIS letter by one letter, and it will then send out the new information onto the website, come back with a new updated weather and runway report here, a new ATIS, without you ever having to do anything. So once you've done it and set it up once, unless you're actually changing runways, you won't even need to come back in this screen. It will just continuously update. You could be online for 12 hours. It will continuously update as long as you're online. So assuming you got that to work, you can hit close, and I'll show you just a few things that happen here. After you successfully connected your voice ATIS, just like with your primary voice channel, your ATIS channel appears right here. If I go back into voice communication setup and scroll down to CYYZ_ATIS, you'll see that there is a preset channel for this, and that Euroscope has automatically found it and has enabled voice and transmission and receive, and labeled it as an ATIS channel. If something happens and this check mark disappears, as often happens when you get suddenly disconnected from the network, you'll notice again we get the 199.998 error flag here next to the ATIS. If you ever see that when you're connected and you're just trying to fix your ATIS, the easiest thing is to go into voice communication setup and make sure that ATIS button is check marked. As soon as I click it, boom, it goes back to the correct frequency. So that's basically it for the first half of this video. You've now hopefully successfully connected to the network, gotten a little bit of an insight into how Euroscope works, and even seen how to quickly set up an ATIS. If you've had any problems along the way, like I said, please let your instructor know.
email them, contact them somehow, and they'll be glad to help answer questions and get you on your way. So don't be frustrated if something bad happened and something didn't work out the way it was supposed to. We'll gladly help you figure it out. But hopefully you learned a little something while following along, and hopefully you learned a little something in the second half video where I'll just continue to go through the rest of the menus here in Euroscope.